Well, good afternoon, and welcome to Season 4 of Itasca Water's Practical Water Wisdom series, which focuses on issues related to water and ways to resolve those issues. I'm your host, Brian Whittemore. Today's episode is called Lakeshore Development and Natural Shoreline Protection to Preserve Biotic Health. Itasca Waters is a nonprofit volunteer organization headquartered in Itasca County, Minnesota, for the purpose of educating folks about the value of clean water for the environment and the economy. We offer a ton of good information for full and part-time residents through our programs, and it's all available on our website, itascawaters.org. We thank these partners for helping Itasca Waters offer our Water Wisdom series. Our expert presenters are Mike Isensee and Tom Langer. They will speak to us for about a half hour and then take your questions. To submit a brief question, just click on the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen and type it in. You can do that at any time during today's program, and we will read the questions on your behalf. Today's program is being recorded and will soon be available on our website, itascawaters.org. As we mentioned, the subject for today is Lakeshore Development, Natural Shoreline Assessment, Monitoring, and Outreach. Mike Isensee is the administrator of the Carnelian-Marine-St. Croix Watershed District. He has over 20 years' experience prioritizing, targeting, and managing water quality improvements for cherished water resources within thriving communities. He leads the implementation of the district's 10-year management plan to achieve measurable goals for 31 lakes, 21 streams, and 18 miles of the St. Croix River. Tom Langer is an aquatic biologist who received a BS from the University of St. Thomas and an MS from Central Michigan University, where he focused on understanding how aquatic environments and human stressors shape the biotic communities of lakes, streams, and wetlands. Since then, he has worked in private and public sectors and focused on integrating environmental sciences into everyday practice through his work with lake associations, cities, counties, and watershed districts throughout Minnesota. Tom currently works for the Carnelian-Marine-St. Croix Watershed District as a riparian and regulatory specialist, where he is focused on engaging citizens and contractors on the importance of shoreland and shoreline habitats, so the trend of Minnesota's vanishing natural shores can be restored to a balance of what landowners want and what the lakeshore or streamside needs to be healthy. So let's get to it. Here are Tom and Mike. Guys, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Brian. Mike Isensee here, and I'm going to kick us off. Okay, so I just wanted to give a little bit of context of where we're at. The Carnelian-Marine-St. Croix Watershed District is located in Northeast Washington County, in the 7-county metro. We're kind of right at the border of the metropolitan area. As as you've heard, we have a lot of water resources within our 81 square miles. Tom and I are the two full-time permanent staff, and we have 7 board managers on our district. So when we were developing the 10-year management plan for the watershed district, we did a lot of engagement. We have just over 8,000 residents within the district and did a lot of work both with engaging landowners, those who own shoreline property, and those that are within the district that do not own shoreline property, and farmers, as well as a lot of state, local, and regional technical authorities to develop this 10-year management plan. And really, I think the key piece is that during the development of the plan, we were really targeting measurable outcomes for what we wanted to accomplish over the next decade. So during the development of that plan, one of the things that surprised us the most was that when we took our survey results and our input from shoreline residents as well as non-shoreline residents, we saw a really high propensity of residents who really wanted to see more enforcement of rules to protect water quality and natural shorelines. So investigating this a little bit further as we were developing the plan, we were taking a look at a lot of our lakes, and really what we were seeing is that it seems like most people living on lakes understood that what we really need for a healthy lake system are lots that look like this, but the majority of the lots that we were seeing had been heavily altered, and we're lacking native vegetation, and we're looking more like this. So this really kind of set out in our plan our goals for restoring natural shorelines or measuring, getting baseline data for our shorelines. But that wasn't it. So we knew that if we wanted to really measure the impact of our efforts that we would be doing for the next 10 years, we really needed to like dig deeper into the weeds and understand better what people's perspectives and priorities were. So after the 10-year management plan was in place in 2023, we mailed out 565 Lakeshore owner surveys as a baseline survey. We wanted to measure knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors towards water resources as a baseline so we can repeat that at the midpoint of the plan and at the end of the plan. But some of the information that we learned about that was really important really kind of came out of our focus groups with lakeshore owners. And so we often heard on Big Marine and Big Carnelian Lake, which are two big recreational lakes, things like, what they love about what initially drew them to the lake was that the property is fairly secluded and they'd let people love the nature and the bike trails. It feels like being up north without having to drive so far. Big Marine Lake is an undiscovered gem. Been fishing on the lake for 25 years and finally got the opportunity to move here 5 years ago. We looked for something that felt like a cabin up north. We were looking for a deep, clear lake. So really all of these values centered around a more natural aesthetic and high water quality. So really, this I think reinforces what we see throughout the Midwest is that what people really want for their lakeshore property is really well represented on this graphic on the left. And unfortunately, what we're seeing, most of the outcomes on our lakes, especially as you get closer to the metropolitan area or in areas of high urban development, are kind of more things that are on the right. And so we're seeing, there are a couple of things that I just want to point out that are differences between these two. You see native shoreline vegetation, including trees and shrubs on the left. You see the house and structures set back from the shoreline, and it's kind of hard to see in there, but there's like a depressional area between that area and the lake. So stormwater is captured and soaks into the ground. You see emergent shoreline vegetation as well as submergent and floating. And one important piece I think that a lot of people miss is down at the very bottom of the lake on that photo on the left is actually woody habitat. So the structure within the lakes to support that fisheries community. So with that, I will pass it off to Tom, who'll talk a little bit more about. I'm sorry, I have one more slide. um, so because we're seeing the development of our shorelines, and we're not seeing as much of what people want. Really what happened was the Department of Natural Resources and Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, looking at fisheries data in the area, listed both Big Marine Lake and Big Carnelian Lake as at high risk of becoming impaired for lack of biodiversity. And again, this is based on the fisheries population, and the primary driver for that decline that they're seeing in the lakes is shoreline and shoreland alteration as the primary stressor. So from the state level, then they really kind of drove the need for what we're seeing now, our efforts to restore shoreline and shoreland areas on these developed parcels. So going back to our survey data, how did people feel in our area when they learned that these lakes are being listed for declining biodiversity? So get responses like, questions like, is Big Marine Lake still good compared to other lakes? You go fishing and you only catch little ones, and they are foot long and skinny. When I first moved here, there were so many fish you could almost walk across the lake on their backs. And not surprised, I've seen it happening over the years. And I think that last one really resonates with what we saw in our survey results from Lakeshore owners as well. So, in our watershed management plan, our goal for our lakes is to have at least 75% of the lakeshore parcels on each lake have at least 50% natural vegetation. So, this is really promoting that the majority of lakeshore parcels have half of their shoreline, really, that they're leaving for the lake to support the ecology of the lake. And then utilizing the other half for all their recreational access activities. So with that, I will pass it off to Tom to talk more about how we're measuring the our baseline as well as our progress towards these goals.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Mike. So really the task became how do we go from this concept of a measurable goal of 75% of lakeshore parcels meeting 50% natural condition and collect data in a way that we could actually engage stakeholders. So that's what I'm going to talk through a little bit about that process. But I like to start off again with my ecology and biology background with sharing a little bit about the fish. So here's images of fish that I'm guessing most of the audience, regardless of your background, you might be familiar with. And here's probably some of the common names or slang terms that you might call these fish. And why do we know these fish? I love posing this question because typically the answer in an interactive setting, people would tell me that, well, it's the fish we eat and catch, or the bait we use to catch those fish. But I think what's more interesting is all of these other fish are found within many lakes and especially our district lakes. They're all the small fish, which most people would, I would argue, consider or classify as minnow, which is synonymous with baby fish in that terminology. But these are actually very important species that tell us a lot about the health of the lake. They thrive in very specific habitats. They start to disappear as human stressors or shoreline alterations start to exceed thresholds within a lake. So this is really when Mike was talking about what the state is using as tools to tell us about the health. We're really using it through the eye of the fish and their perspective of what's a healthy ecosystem. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I've thoroughly gone through the literature, and it's amazing the vast amount of literature that does exist on what supports a healthy fishery or a natural ecosystem beyond fish, and things that really stood out. First and foremost, woody debris along a shoreline is very critical to the health of a lot of fisheries components, from diversity to the types of species to the food that fish are feeding on. Vegetation, so this could be submergent or emergent vegetation, was also a significant habitat that benefits the ecosystem. But what we see through the removal of woody debris or vegetation or the change of a shoreline from a natural shoreline condition to beach or rock is we start to lose the functions. We start to lose critical habitats, therefore we lose species, and they become replaced with undesirable species. And ultimately, the scientific literature is very clear in terms that these shoreline modifications are negatively impacting lake ecosystems. So really, what's the solution? Well, it's keeping or restoring these types of critical habitats. They range from, right along the shoreline, deep rooted in woody ground cover, trees and shrubs to provide kind of a third dimension of structure and habitat. This also has an aesthetic component where you don't have to see other people's stuff. You actually get to see beyond the lake and look shoreland and see what looks to be natural. In the water, we start to get emergent vegetation, and then all the different forms of woody debris. The trees that overhang the lake, those that are used, loafing logs, we call it, these are more for turtles or ducks to perch on. And then the things out in the water themselves are fish sticks. So these are kind of the critical habitats. So we wanted to adopt a protocol that the DNR already has in existence called Score the Shore or Score Your Shore. So So we adapted this. I like to joke and say that we actually call it in-house Score Our Shore, because what we did is we took the exact sampling protocol and tweaked it so that we are sampling each individual parcel, and then we added questions, because what we were really curious at a local level was if the habitat was disappearing, what was replacing it? So in this graphic here, I've added in the dark are the things that are kind of already a part of the protocol. What we then did is kind of this italicized gray, as these are things that we added in these different zones across the lakeshore in terms of what were we interested in. Ultimately, the survey protocol ranks a shoreline from high, moderate to very low. And again, we kept this because this helps us compare how our geography is doing across the state. The other thing I like to illustrate again through just this schematic representation is what is the district's goal? And as Mike alluded to, our goal is not 100% preservation. It is trying to strike that balance between use and what the lake needs. So really, we're targeting this schematic or greater versus these ones where the habitat across that shoreline, or that near shore zone are completely absent. So the district, we have 31 lakes and we're a staff of 2. So we needed to prioritize lakes because we didn't have the capacity to sample all 31. So we went through an exercise to try to trim down to 10 lakes. And really what we were looking at to prioritize lakes was water quality and biological trends, lakes of high quality or high protection status, lakes that were developed and redeveloping, or lakes that were undeveloped and starting to develop. So looking at things like lot total density, developing lots, and then what was the existing shoreline condition. So in the end, we came up with 10 lakes and we surveyed every single parcel over a 2-year period. So we encompassed roughly 39 miles of shoreline, almost 650 parcels, in which majority of those were developed. The good news is that to collect all that data was one thing, but to try to do it in a way that was streamlined so that we could process it quickly. So available tools and resources exist online using ARC software in Survey 123. I won't go into the nuances of this because we had some assistance from our local soil and water conservation district to help just kind of format this, but happy to share any of that information if anybody is interested in kicking off a similar program. But what it allowed us to do is map out the individual parcels, create these survey points on each parcel, click a button on our phone or tablet, snap pictures, answer basic survey questions, and then process and quickly spit out either maps or graphics, things like that. I'm not going to go into the depth of this one, but just to highlight the other important thing to this survey is we knew we wanted to repeat this through time. As Mike alluded to, we have measurable goals. It's a 10-year management plan. So it was very important we could come back to the same survey point and conduct the exact same survey. So there's ways to set this up again to really streamline it so that it's very simple to compare years, to collect data points moving forward. So what did we find? This kind of gets at the meat and gravy of it all. In terms of lakeshore health, we had lake health span a wide spectrum from moderate down to very low. And then what I did is included a district average and then a statewide average. So we had some lakes that surpassed the statewide average. Well, then we have some here in the red that were well below the state average. And then the 2 lowest that we had were the ones listed by the MPCA as nearly impaired for aquatic life. So maybe not that surprising to have that be the case. I think pictures are worth 1,000 words. So here I've highlighted different habitats. And again, the district goal here of the graphics in the green are on the right side here, where it's that blend of use or even greater versus ones where you start to lose some of those critical habitats and you get down to lots where there's actually no critical habitat left between the home and the body of water. And in this graphic, again, there's no trees, there's no shrubs, there's no native ground cover. We have a rock wall, we have 100% lot line to lot line beach. So pretty pretty fascinating to see that. I don't think that was surprising to see some parcels that way. I think what surprised us though was the sheer number of parcels that hit that. So Big Carnelian Lake, our lowest scoring lake, we looked at the data in a different way, and this graphic is saying the number of parcels absent of habitat. So there's roughly 200 parcels on this lake, and in some cases, woody debris or forms of woody debris were 100% absent or 99% absent. But it's amazing to think of more common things like trees and shrubs. In some cases, 50% of the parcels didn't have a tree or shrub between the home and the lake. So again, this really jumped out to us and supported that evidence that we were being told by the state that these lakes are nearly impaired for aquatic life. Well, when you zoom in a little bit more, this is the stuff that we were starting to see on properties. So here's a single parcel, and you can see where the water is in 10, 20 feet landward. There isn't anything natural about this. You have a tiki bar, a patio, porch, walkway, walls, grading and filling, replacement with turf grass, riprap or rock, boulders, and then a beach carve out. So the other thing about our survey protocol that was nice is so we were able to step back and kind of look at this at a lake-wide perspective and say, across all of our different lakes, what types of features or structures are within ordinance setbacks and what types? So we had things retaining walls, patios, steps, paths, sheds, decks, porch. So some of these like steps, we want to promote. We want to promote people having access to the lake. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. But if we have sheds or decks or retaining walls, things that could really impact the biology or the landscape around it, really jumped out. So in this example here, Little Carnelian Lake is a natural environmental lake, so it has some of the highest setback standards. Almost 3 out of every 4 parcels on this lake had some form of structure or feature within the setback. So in addition to structures, we asked the question of, okay, what's happening on the actual shoreline itself? What are we seeing as the dominant shoreline type? So what type of shoreline was 50% or more of that property? And again, we had some pretty high quality lakes where the natural condition here, or the dominant condition, was a natural shoreline condition. But then as we move closer to our lakes nearly impaired of Big Marine and Big Carnelian, you can see that natural component significantly dropped off to around 25 to 30%, with the predominant shoreline type being riprap, beach, or turf. And then we classified other. People have asked me on this. Other just basically, it's so poor that even turf grass wasn't growing, so it's almost exposed dirt or sediment. So, and then stepping back just quickly, looking at some aerial photography. The nice thing about the mapping and everything that we were doing is we're starting to see trends, and rock and sand are they're increasing and becoming very normalized. People like the aesthetic of it, was a common thing that we heard. And therefore communities or neighborhood stretches were really adopting what their neighbor had in a direction that wasn't beneficial for the lake. Zooming in though, we did find kind of localized differences at times where people were pursuing different techniques to try to stabilize their shoreline. Here we have a rock wall. And in this case, we have somebody who's gone a very natural route. And then we had the classic turf to water look as well. So I think with that, I'm going to kick it back over to Mike to walk through just potential solutions. And before I quick do, I like to highlight to people this graphic here these are all the different authorities within our watershed district, and a lot of these exist statewide, maybe not the watershed district, but when you hit the shoreline, it's a very critical zone, and there's a lot of partners that acknowledge that in their rules, their ordinances, in their engagement efforts. So one thing that we really try to strive at the watershed district is this last bullet here is partners in collaboration. So with that, I'll kick it over to Mike.
Great. Yeah. So when we think about, who are the partners, who are the collaborators when it comes to shoreline, there's a big group. And I just thought I would go through and share each of the groups that we're working with. And so maybe what I'll do is kick it off with landowners and neighborhoods communities. So what are we doing with these groups? So we publish and mail a Watershed District newsletter every or twice a year with news and updates as part of our engagement efforts. We do workshops with Lakeshore owners focused on steps to consider for restoring your shore. Lots of targeted mailings regarding the value and function and types of habitat, as well as lots of articles and newspapers, both in the newspapers and in our blog sites. But then, really, in the lower right-hand corner, I think one of the most effective things that we've been doing is getting together with lake associations, as well as we have quite a few lakes that don't have associations, but they have neighborhood groups or private road management associations, and engaging them and talking about ways that we can work together to help accomplish our long-term goals for the health of the lake. And that's not all. We also do open houses. We've done targeted open houses for most of our lakes over the last couple of years. We've also we also provide in the upper right-hand corner there, that's the cover of our welcome letter. So we basically update parcel data for properties that have transitioned within the district every 6 months. And then we're generally generating a list of 30 to 50 new landowners that have purchased property and are likely moving to the Watershed District. So we send them a welcome letter along with this welcome packet, which has great information about the excellent resources that we have, natural resources we have within the area, as well as things that people can do and resources they can take advantage of if they're planning to do modifications to their property. The lower left-hand corner, we've been working with landowners to get DNR permitting and install an anchor woody habitat to restore that. This is on Big Marine Lake. We also provide, through the Conservation District, who has a landscape architect, we provide free designs for landowners looking to do shoreline stabilization or restoration projects, as well as a cost share program. So I should also just note, we do a lot of articles, lots of article writing. We're lucky to have a partnership with an education collaborative here in Washington County, and there we do a lot of writing about all of the benefits that we're seeing out there, and highlighting landowners and improvements we're seeing within the watershed. We also partner on an effort that was initiated in Washington County a number of years ago to do better realtor trainings for shoreline, for realtors working primarily with shoreline properties or that may have shoreline clients within their target audience. So those are hosted twice a year, and now that has become an online offering for accreditation through the Minnesota Realtors Association. Contractors are a really important group. A lot of contractors that we found, a lot of after the fact shoreline modification violations that we found have been driven primarily by contractors telling landowners that permits weren't needed to do the work, and it was wrong. So for the last couple of years, we've been focusing on engaging with our contractor community, offering trainings, and after the contractors attend the training, we put them on our list of shoreline contractors for landowners. So when landowners reach out to us for permitting or for technical assistance to do a shoreline restoration project, we provide a list of those contractors who have been to our trainings. Finally, we've, the local zoning. So we have both county and city ordinances throughout our district. And so county has shoreline ordinances, and cities have local shoreline ordinances for their cities. And so we do a lot of general education for them. We do a workshop on the water where we talk about challenges, working together to do a better job in implementing ordinances. We also do a lot of planning and outreach for our planning commission members and for our council members within our cities and communities. Some of the things that have come out of that, have been improved, like closing some gaps that we had in some shoreline ordinances, and basically better communications and coordination with staff at these local units of government. And with that, I'll let Tom talk about a lot of the work that he's been doing and with engaging and working with the technical staff and communities in the county.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So, as Mike alluded to, a big effort here, and going back to that previous graphic where I showed you all the different people that if you were to perform a project on a lakeshore parcel, say rebuilding a cabin, you're likely going to alter potentially things all the way from the shoreline into the water. So you're working with a lot of different people. So one of the strong efforts we've really tried to make a push for is helping citizens through a streamlined regulatory process. So while all of these jurisdictions exist, if we can come together and be more helpful to landowners so that they don't have to necessarily run to each one of us and have individual siloed conversations, like pull them together. So that's another way, in addition to working with councils and planning commissions, commissioners in terms of sharing that, is we're trying to share the resources in terms of helping citizens through that. And then I think the nature of every regulatory program is there are going to be instances where violations do occur, sometimes innocent, sometimes I think intentional, but really working through, again, a joint process, because some of these alterations usually impact multiple jurisdiction rules, and no one likes to be scolded more than once. So if we can come together and then work through kind of a technical evaluation process or panel, and then share a single letter with a landowner and invite them to voluntarily comply with restoration requirements, we have seen significant reduction in the number of violations. When I first started at the district a few years ago, I think we had upwards of a dozen to maybe 18 shoreline violations. And then last year, every year we stepped down, and last year we had 2. So I think the word is spreading that, enforcement is there, but it's not our goal to be punitive, but I think we're really getting message across to people that these alterations do have significant impact. So really stepping back out now, the big question is this all working? And I think the data that we've collected is that a really great initial step to baselining this condition. And then through our 10-year management plan, we've prioritized actually collecting similar data periodically. This is everything from the survey engagement work to actually doing the lakeshore monitoring, so that we can track everything from people's knowledge and insight and education changing, and the behavioral changes, and then are we actually seeing people take on restoration projects on their own shoreline to bring back some of these critical habitats. So more to come, hopefully, in the future for you all in terms of that question of success. But where I'll maybe leave it for now is the few takeaways I like to say is what's really been successful for us is quantifying lakeshore conditions. I think it's helped us get over the hurdle of everybody can acknowledge that, yeah, lakeshore development happens, but putting numbers and percentages of parcels that have fallen into different categories has really been eye-opening, especially for local government officials that have to make tough choices and decisions. Regardless of that, education, engagement, and regulatory all play a critical role to correcting the trend of vanishing shorelines. And partnerships amongst all of us is going to be essential to make that happen. And then really like to end on the note that we do share, I don't want to talk just from a regulatory or government perspective, but as a landowner and citizen myself, of the lakeshore parcel, is that we actually all are sharing a vision for our lakes. Our survey results have documented that people want what's on the right. I think the education, engagement, and regulatory process is definitely oriented to help people achieve that. So with that, I'll say thank you, and I will back out of here because I believe next is Q&A. So.
You got it. Thank you, Tom and Mike. Now let's get to the questions. Handling that part of today's program is Hillary Sorensen, Water Resources Extension Educator at Minnesota Sea Grant. Hillary?
Thanks, Brian. Thanks so much, Tom and Mike, for that wonderful presentation. So much information. I love the graphics. We do have a few questions. So first up, and this can be for either of you, regarding, this is coming from Tom M. Regarding wake surf boat activity, once the upcoming university study on prop wash is published, what plans does your agency have in place to protect the fisheries and maintain water quality? This may be referring to the St. Anthony Falls lab study that's looking at wake boats and their impacts.
Yeah, so uh, the challenge I think with wake boats is that there are two entities that can regulate. One would be the DNR, and the other one would be the county. Or there's also a third route that landowners could take, which is a legislative action to classify no wake zones on their lakes. Um, we provide landowners with information about how to proceed through that process if they want to pursue it. But really, the watershed district doesn't have any authority in that realm other than providing information for residents who inquire. So at this point, um, just like every lakeshore owner, wake boats are a big concern, and they're documenting damage. And we're really kind of in a position where we're just hopeful that the DNR collects enough evidence to set reasonable standards that can accommodate both wake boat usage as well as protection of shoreline.
Thank you for that. Okay, second question, also from Tom M. Have you considered offering a small targeted free planting program to showcase to selected homeowners? This could help spark discussions within the lake community about the benefits and aesthetics of such activities.
Yeah, yeah. This we have a large education and engagement wish list. One of the items on that is to host yard parties with residents. This has been an effective engagement tool that I've used in previous locations prior to coming to the Carnelian-Marine-St Watershed District. But what we need to pull that off is we need willing landowners. And so we have tried a couple of times to reach out and haven't had any landowners take us up on it yet. But we're hopeful that it will be happening soon. But I would also note that I didn't really go into our cost share program. We have two cost share opportunities for lakeshore landowners. One is a 50% cost share for any landowner that has anything that's not a natural shoreline that wants to convert back to a natural shoreline. The 50% cost share is based on a free design conducted by the Washington Conservation District, their landscape architect, where they work with the landowner to put the plans together for the restoration. And then when they're done with the plan set, they've got a list of materials that they can then send to multiple contractors to get apples to apples comparisons on prices. So, and then that's one cost share program. The other cost share program is we have a 75% cost share up to $1,000. So basically, if landowner spends $1,000 or more on native shoreline plants, then the district will reimburse $750. That was really simple. It's basically a plant list that's provided with a visit with the conservation district, and the conservation district can come back out and help with the placement for the plants that the landowner bought, working together with them. And we've seen actually that be really successful, not only for lakeshore landowners who don't have native plantings, but for lakeshore landowners who have native plantings, but they are desiring to do a little management, cleaning up, and maintenance for bare spots, etc. So that's probably been one of our more popular ones. But I would say that in general, lakeshore landowners on our lakes are noticing that lake shores are starting to transition to more natural conditions, which is great.
Perfect. All right, thank you. Next question. This is from Teresa. Should trees that fall into the lake that are not interfering with boat traffic just be left in the water?
Sure, I can jump in and take this one. Yes. Yeah, I think especially if a lake, if your property, if the tree falls in an area where it's not impeding not just boats out in the lake, but actually your individual recreation. I think maybe to add to Mike's talk, one of the things our board has approved us as staff to do is assist landowners with navigating putting trees in a lake. So this is, I'll make a plug. The DNR is not trying to promote people dumping their Christmas trees in the lake. So that's not what we're talking about. These tend to be a little bit more sizable trees. They could be everything that exists on your shoreline. It's a diseased tree that's going to fall anyway. You might want to strategically fell it at a time where docks or other things aren't in the lake. Or we've had people redeveloping a property and they need to take down a tree. Well, with a big excavator or backhoe there, they can use the bucket, pick it up, and set it in the lake. And again, really, it's just promoting that. What part of your property do you want to and need to use? And I think when people generally step back and reflect on that, if you own 100 feet of shoreline, odds are you're probably actively using maybe a third of that. So then it becomes this question, can we strategically place things maybe on your property edges in a manner that's not going to impact your neighbors? And that's actually gone over very well. Our ability to help people. We last year was the first year where we began to implement that, and I think we had 5 landowners take us up on that offer. And it's amazing the stories that they came back with. I mean, I think the one that stands out the most is the guy was beaming. He's like, I bought this property, and in my head, or what I was told at the time, is I needed to remove everything that was in the lake. So he's like, I cleaned up all the wood and pulled this out. And this was 30 years ago. Fast forward, he put one tree in the lake, and he's like, the next day, I've had a green heron visit and sit perched in this tree every day for the last 14 days because we waited till we came back and inspected stuff. And then he's like, underneath, all the fish are already back, the bluegills, the fishing opportunity. He's like, probably the fish that you've told me exist in the lake are back, but I don't know what to call them besides a minnow. Those are probably back too. So, and he got up and shared that in front of his entire association. So very powerful. And a long-winded answer to the question of if your tree falls in the lake and it's not impacting anything, yes, my answer would be to leave it.
Awesome. Everything's a minnow. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, next question. This one's from Sarah. Are you familiar with the resources available through the Minnesota Lakes and Rivers and their Lake Steward program? Are you taking advantage of those resources to encourage appropriate shoreline landscaping?
Yeah, we work really closely with Jeff and the Minnesota Lake and Stewards program. We do have a couple of lake stewards within the watershed district, but I don't know, it hasn't taken off as well here as we had hoped, and we're continuing to discuss like ways to engage that. As a matter of fact, we wrote an LCCMR grant together last year that didn't get selected, but it's a marathon and not a sprint. And so, yeah, we're aware of them and working with them, but thanks for that.
Awesome. Yeah, great resource there. And then this one from Tom M. Is that 75% program just for your area or is that statewide?
Yeah, that's a great question. That is a standard that reviewing literature and considering what we felt we could accomplish before collecting all of that baseline data, it's a value that we selected as a watershed district. I would note that we are part of the Natural Shoreline Partnership, and we are partnering with the Department of Natural Resources to do additional follow-up survey work for the fisheries based on our 10-year management plan goals and the progress that we're hoping to make. And I think one of the questions that we're advocating with all of those groups is, we really could use a standard or a range in the future on, how much habitat is enough or how much habitat, natural habitat on shorelines is critical for lakes. And so unfortunately, the science isn't there to support a number yet. So that was a local standard that we set just for our watershed management plan.
Thank you very much. Next one. This is kind of a follow-up logistical question. Someone would like to connect directly with you, Mike and Tom. Are you all right with us sharing your contact information after this so folks can follow up? Wonderful. Yes, we will do that. And then just a reminder that this webinar presentation will also be posted on the Itasca Waters website and the Minnesota Secret website. And so you'll be able to, anybody who wasn't able to be here today or would like to see this, or if you'd like to share it, this will also be available. Okay. Sorry, I'm looking at my questions here. Another question, how important are local government unit ordinances in protecting or mitigating for shorelines and lakeshore habitats?
Yeah, I can try to take a stab at this one. In essence, I would say very important. So local communities typically adopt and they can go further than the DNR's shoreline model ordinances. And really this is to govern or help establish kind of a standard from what's called the ordinary high water mark and above. That is what's considered land use authority, which would be your community. And that's everything from where a home or a structure can be built to the vegetation screening and grading that occurs on a lakeshore property. And that can be very critical because oftentimes a new landowner might purchase a property and come in with an expectation of, I bought this property because I want to clear cut the bluff sides because I want this panorama view of the lake. And they might not understand the impact that has. So having those local ordinances in place and kind of sticking behind them is very important. So that is one of the groups that we are continuously working with because they're comprised of local community members and they do transition and turn over. So sharing presentations like this or the data that we've collected helps them understand why they have these ordinances and why it's important to uphold them.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, next question. How does monitoring help inform decisions with data rather than emotion?
Yeah, it's great. Again, I think maybe I'll just pick on kind of the local aspect to it. A lot of people in the decisions of power or decision makers, I guess I'll say, th they're community members. They know their neighbors, and when their neighbors come in asking for innocent tweaks or changes, they have to be the ones to stand behind it. And I think that's where without data, the emotional strings and the heartstrings really get pulled. Because most regulatory programs, the standards aren't necessarily to be punitive to an individual landowner. What they're there is so that the collective buildup of everybody's decision doesn't lead to a negative outcome for the lake. So in our specific cases, sharing specific data, for example, like the tree surveys of 50% of parcels don't have a tree between the home and the lake, was really eye-opening to one of our local communities that actually has the authority to require tree replacement with home redevelopment. And they were starting to realize that a lot of their decisions, they were allowing this development to happen and those trees to be removed, thinking that landowners would naturally want to put them back. But fast forward now to decades of that happening, the data shows that that's not the case. So just as a quick example of how that data helps those decision points rely on information, not just what they either perceive or their heartstrings. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay. A couple more questions in here. Are protection efforts more important for certain types of lakes over others?
Yeah, I would say that we have two types of lake designations, recreational lakes and natural environment lakes. I think that uh, the protection standards for a natural environment lake in Washington County is a 200-foot setback from the shoreline. And those lakes are doing exceptionally well for lake ecology. Recreational lakes have a 50-foot. A lot of them were developed before, or have a 100-foot setback, but a lot of those were developed prior to the implementation of the rules. So we have a lot of lots that are much less than 100 feet, sometimes 50, sometimes 30, and those are the lakes where we're seeing more impact of the shoreline. And I think, my personal opinion is that the closer you are to the lake, the more the lake shore just feels like your backyard, right? So when you're 200 feet off the lake and it's all woodland, with 200-foot woodland area around the lake, we tend to have less clear cutting, less transition of the shoreline from natural conditions to all of the artificial conditions that Tom was noting. But I think in general, I guess our opinion would be all lakes need protection, and the designation between a natural environment lake and a recreational lake is really a more of a policy decision for the types of impacts that people are willing to have to a lake in order to accommodate those specific types of uses.
And maybe I'll just add, I agree with everything Mike was saying. And in terms of a lake, those critical habitats that I showed earlier in the presentation, from natural vegetation and trees, shrubs to down woody debris, regardless of the lake, those are kind of the critical habitats for all lakes along that shoreline area. So again, they're equally as valued regardless of how we define the status of a lake, I guess.
Thank you so much for that. Okay, a couple more questions. We have time for a few more here. Are you aware of the Lawns to Legumes program and individual grant possibilities? If so, does this program help shorelines also?
Yep, we're aware. Actually, we received a large scale lawns to legume grant project a couple of years ago, where we focused on landowners that were doing riparian area restoration. So that was both on our lakes and streams, and it was really effective. We work with landowners through a number of different cost share programs or technical assistance programs. And one of our other big challenges that we have besides shoreline development is maintaining natural riparian buffers, which become degraded primarily by buckthorn. And then with the loss of native vegetation, we see the loss of perennial ground cover and increased erosion and declining health of our streams as well. So, yep, we've had a lot of lawns to legumes projects within the Watershed district, and a lot of landowners who apply and get those. And I also am aware that it currently is not in the governor's budget, so that program may be coming to an end depending on the outcome of this legislative session.
Thank you. Okay, I think one more question here. What is a balanced human use versus natural need lakeshore? It's a big question.
Yeah, I'll maybe take a first stab, and Mike, you can always chime in with your thoughts. And to me personally, I think it can vary depending on the landowner, because it really boils back to that question of truthfully, like, answering how much of the shoreline do you need for your recreation aspects. And I say that because some people are bigger swimmers, some people are bigger boaters, some people are bigger fishermen. And with that kind of comes probably differences in what you want. But I think regardless, every one of those classifications, there's still opportunities to create habitat or give portions of your shoreline back to the lake. And to me, I think what's the most eye-opening aspect is when people do make that conversion back to incorporating even a small amount, 15 feet of natural shoreline. It's amazing the reports that we get of they're seeing butterflies, they're seeing wildlife, they're seeing turtles, they're seeing fish, birds. So I think that starts to speak to a whole different level of what people didn't realize was was possible. And then I think the other aspect that I like to include is there's there's two other fronts. There's pet owners, and when it's amazing how pets will love the natural habitats and stuff. So they always go through that. And then there's the generational aspect where people always are trying to think of their kids and their grandkids. So things like beaches and that tend to be kind of thought of as like you need this really big thing, but it's amazing how kids, especially young kids, will gravitate to sitting in one spot on a beach. But when it's a natural shoreline, they will go foraging through it with a butterfly net to catch a snake, a frog, a butterfly. So I think it's kind of maybe one of those lost aspects that people don't necessarily put at the front of their mind, how helping and assisting nature, even in a small little habitat, can go a long ways.
Yeah, I think that was a great answer, Tom. I don't have anything additional to add.
Awesome. I was muted, like I haven't done this enough. Well, thank you both so very much for sharing your time today. Really appreciate it. And I will pass things back over to Brian.
Okay, thank you, Hillary, and thank you, Mike Isensee and Tom Langer. This program, as Hillary said, will be available soon on our website, itascawaters.org. Please feel free to recommend it to family and friends and neighbors. Also, we're asking for your ideas about the Water Wisdom series, and you can use the survey link on screen or respond to the evaluation form that we'll email you. The next program will be a very special one. It will be tomorrow, March 7th, and feature Minnesota Sea Grant Director John Downing, who will talk to us about the Minnesota Ice Out forecast for 2025. You can register for free on itascawaters.org, and we urge you to sign up today to reserve your spot for tomorrow's special 2025 Ice Out forecast. I'm Brian Whittemore. Thanks for watching today.